we're getting played. So Carney's whole campaign and the entire Liberal campaign is nested in this collective fear, this sense of panic, and we don't know what to do. And we have this natural attachment system that wants to plug us in and connect us to a leader to take away our anxiety. And we've found ourselves a nice, simple explanation narrative that's going to tell us what all this means. Trump is trying to take our country. He wants our resources. He wants our water. He wants our way of life. He wants our... And Carney has been playing that song and banging that drum for weeks.
The relationship we had with the Americans, these guys weren't wrong. They want us to be the 51st state. They want to break us. They want to break us so they can own us. They want our resources. They want our water. They want our land. They want our country. And what do we say? You don't have to die. You don't have to die.
Welcome to the weekly Canadian Culture Wars Report. My name is Shannon Boucher. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure, if you like this video, that you like and subscribe. I'm going to continue my commentary on things like social contagion and mass psychosis in the coming weeks, especially with the current election. And my colleague and friend Melanie Bennett, co-host of the channel, posting some of the documented infrastructure of woke madness and ideological capture of our institutions in Canada, especially in the public education system. This is one of the mechanisms of totalitarian takeover, is to control the education system in a society and create a new generation of radical activists to end our way of life.
He's a thief. Are you casting this? Because I want to tell everybody this.
Yeah, well,
yeah, put that on. Go ahead, put that on.
I will.
Yeah.
Don't you worry about it.
That's good because it's the truth.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
A couple of weeks ago, something hit me in the face. And that was that it appeared to me a week, 10 days ago, that we're being subjected to a psychological operation. And that's a wild claim, and when people make those sorts of claims, in the olden days, we used to, offer them a tinfoil hat and maybe nod and smile a little bit. And I assure you, that, well, let me say I'd invite you to consider what I'm going to share with you, because I'd like to find out if I'm the one having trouble organizing reality here. Okay, behind me, I pointed this out before. This is a whole bookshelf on social influence, marketing, stock market bubbles, mass contagion, how animals synchronize together. It is a part of my collection on let's call it sociology from a mass movement or a mass coherence perspective. Farther behind me, I have several shelves of religious texts and psychological texts. I won't get too far into it. I do want to assure you that I am offering this in good faith. I haven't been drinking. I have actually been watching my very favorite. I'm going to put this in the links. My very favorite YouTube channel of all time. It's called Academy of Ideas. Oh my gosh, is that right? This is After Skool, and that connects with Academy of Ideas somehow. Anyhow, so I'm looking at Academy of Ideas. There's a great video. It's an explainer called Mass Psychosis: How an Entire Population Becomes Mentally Ill. The team there describe some of these mass psychosis events. They can be kind of small, like dancing sicknesses and laughing sicknesses. We've got the trans identity ideology and that whole thing right now. There was a satanic panic in the 90s. These kinds of, let's call them secular social contagions, eating disorders on a lower scale, anorexia, bulimia, things like self-harming, like cutting, etc. Those are all contagious, and they're contagious because of negative emotions. Okay, that's the most effective way to transmit information through sort of or send a contagion out to society. And We've known about how to do this for more than a century. World War I was notorious for propaganda. They just used the word commonly, propaganda. It became very, very toxic. People became aware that it was toxic, and out of that, there was some rebranding by none other than the marketing industry. So we go from wartime propaganda and political propaganda to a burgeoning organized marketing industry to communicate with people over the airwaves. So radio, telegraph, newspaper, how to influence people at large. So these mass influence operations have been around from an economic standpoint for a long time. And there's been over time some checks and balances, from the marketing perspective. Subliminal advertising was investigated and then it was banned. And there's some good advertising practices, so there are boundaries on this. But when it comes to a dark influence or a deliberate mass influence for political or economic gain, to game the system, let's say, there aren't any guardrails. When these things go over the edge, they go bad. When mass psychosis capture a population, the trajectory is mass death, and if not stagnation and depression and oppression. It's a very bleak way to live in existence, especially since in the West we've known about freedom for so long. So I came across this quote. I'm just going to read here. Mass psychosis, an epidemic of madness. It occurs when a large portion of society loses touch with reality and descends into delusions. And along my strange meandering path, about 20 odd years ago, I did I think it was 400 hours of clinical hypnotherapy. Like, there was 2 stages of training. Now, I'm not going to go googly eye on you and then get out a pocket watch to swing back and forth. I part of the training that I had was about ethics and about integrity and using these kinds of things. And they're far simpler than you might be afraid of. So lots of people get concerned if they know somebody who's studied hypnotherapy, that they might be subtly influenced somehow. And there's always consent, at least there always should be, in any kind of influence from that standpoint. But on a mass scale, there very often isn't consent. And the same kinds of tools can be applied to a mass of society as get applied in a hypnotherapy intervention. What causes mass psychosis? It's a flood of negative emotions. So if we all get the flood of negative emotions at the same time, then a certain percentage of us are going to be influenced by that. Now, what it does is it destabilizes our sort of cognitive baseline, and we get thrown into fight or flight as a response. And in that time, if there's no resolution to our anxiety or our free-floating stress, we psychically want to latch onto something to solve the problem. And our natural instinct, and most of us retain this, is oriented towards a parental figure. Okay, that's wired in us from the time we were born. We come out of the womb and we are wired to, let's call it imprint on a parent figure and develop an attachment bond as we grow up. And that attachment bond, changes and evolves over time. And it can be, healthy or unhealthy. There can be all kinds of disorder, the whole field of psychology about this, but we nevertheless have this a mechanism within us to attach to things. And when we get thrown into stress, we automatically get thrown into, like, okay, I got to attach to something to solve this stress. So we're looking around for a solution to our problem from a cognitive and let's call it a psychic perspective. That meaning just within our psyches. Okay, so our attention is madly flitting around, trying to lock onto something that's going to resolve the anxiety. We're looking for a leader. And this is absolutely natural. Now, the people who aren't necessarily influenced by these sorts of things, in some cases, those are those are leaders themselves who have emancipated themselves. Jung would have called that the individuated person, sovereign individual. I'm constantly reflective of how I might be under influence somehow, and I kind of audit that environment to protect my cognitive sovereignty. Okay, so we've got phases of panic and how we deal with it, and then this idea of a psychotic insight or a psychotic break. So with all that stress, the other way that we handle it is we kind of lock into an explanation, a simple model of the world. And that simple model gives us a sense of familiarity and anchor and stability. That's why when you're talking to somebody who's participating in the mass, they all have the same responses. It's like you're talking to the same person or the same influence through multiple people. It's very strange. Recently, when I was at a conference, I heard the same story from people that I was talking to about their parents. And it was like talking to a wall. The responses were all the same. They were fierce, captured by the liberal election campaign right now. So the context of this, of course, is we're in an election. And so we have this phases of psychic insight. We're either going to lock onto or maybe both. Someone who's going to give us a solution and an orienting kind of language and connection on where we're going, a sense of safety. And then we might have a psychotic insight where in combination with that, where we kind of lock in on a model of the world and we can't, that's all the language that we have. Very, very simplistic phrasing, very like Pierre Poilievre has been attacked for months and months about all you use is slogans. And from a marketing perspective, I like Pierre's slogans. They're memorable. Axe the tax, bring it home for a change, time for change. All of that stuff sticks in the mind. And that's at least as far as I can tell, an ethical way of persuading people. It's anchoring a message into people's minds. But you get into trouble when you're planting those subconsciously. You're creating an environment of stress and fear. You're providing the answer to that fear, and that's your script. So you're essentially plugging somebody into a cult or a totalitarian mass, and they're all going to act the same way. That's why we're seeing these days, we're seeing a lot in the lines, in the early election lines, where there's bonkers behavior. There's a meme going around right now of a guy in a red sweater giving people the finger. There's some other altercations I've seen. Liberals are kind of crazy now. There was an incident I saw with a conservative as well, or someone who was not a liberal anyway. But there seems to be, I don't remember an election ever where this kinds of bizarre things were happening in line. We've got biggest swell of people moving towards the polls that we've seen in history. 2 million people this weekend. And it speaks to the kind of anxiety that we have when we want to get to that election day to settle this fear that we have had whipped up within our society. So where do these things get unethical? Now, in hypnosis and hypnotherapy, Tony Robbins is actually a great influence guy, and he calls this a pattern interrupt. So in our normal day-to-day behavior, we kind of get into a routine of trance, and we're focused on a way of doing things and a way of thinking. And to get us out of that pattern, we need like something to jolt us out of our trance, our programming that we normally reside in. And when you pop somebody out of that normal pattern with a pattern interrupt, you put them into a suggestible state. That's the theory in hypnosis. So the idea is you find your way to either build rapport and intensify the connection and rapport with the person and put them in a suggestible state, or you create it can be a very rapid pattern interrupt. You drop a textbook on the ground or do something strange, ask the person a question that throws them off. That's either a puzzle or a cone, or it puts them into what's called the void. So there's ways of getting people through a pattern interrupt into a state where they're suggestible. And fear and social panic is that pattern interrupt. So perhaps in my memory, well, here's a good example. I've talked about this from other angles recently in other videos. The World Trade Center, September 11th, 2001. That was the day I was hired into banking. The regional sales manager promised they were going to call me back and with my offer, and they did so from outside of downtown Toronto late in the afternoon on 9/11. That was a massive pattern interrupt for the world, and it threw us all out of our state. We landed all the planes. The world came to a crashing, halt. And then there was a widespread fear and panic, and that suddenly solidarity in Congress and the House, Republicans and Democrats all standing together, showing unity. And there was this, there was good programming, let's say, following that, at least up until the time when the drums of war started beating for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Anyhow, so COVID, obviously a big pattern interrupt, but we had a major pattern interrupt in 2016 when Donald Trump was originally elected. Trump was like no other politician in our lifetimes. He threw a wrench in the works. There was all kinds of protests and chaos and big stimulating news media. So we were constantly in a state of psychological, let's call it destabilization. Didn't know what was coming at us and after us at any given time. And that's kind of Trump's way. I think that it has an influence on people, probably a little less ethical than I would like in terms of its application. I think Trump does this from an intuitive level, coming from being a television show producer. And an actress shared this idea with me a couple of weeks ago, that life is kind of like, or in that world as a television producer, your life is building a narrative in 7-minute increments. It's constantly, creating a problem, introducing a conflict, and then bringing through to a cliffhanger and suspenseful moment, and then a resolution, another conflict. And it's a way of narrating and guiding people through a dramatic reality show. So Trump has this intuitive way of thinking, and perhaps he is cold enough to do that in a calculating way from the White House. We're running similar programming here in Canada. The tariffs that Trump threw at Canada were embellished. And there was lots of discourse before the end of the year about that. Trudeau went down to Mar-a-Lago, got called governor. And all of a sudden, Canada was in crisis. Trump was going to annex us. And that was a pattern interrupt. And that was also a threat suggestion. Okay. So then we've got, at the same time, we've got to bring in a new leader, and we've created a panic situation in society. The liberal machine kept amplifying this annexation narrative, even though it stopped a long time ago. And it stopped when Trudeau stopped being the prime minister, because it was a joke about calling Trudeau the governor. Trump's had worse names for people. Except when a CBC reporter recently pulled it up and asked in the press gallery, what has President Trump said? Where's his position on this now? And the response was interesting. Trump's position hasn't changed. He still believes Canada would be better off as the 51st state. There's no intention there of annexation. There's no hostility there. It's a statement, perhaps related to a judgment about the situation here in Canada, and the problems and the serious problems that we're currently dealing with. We're going down a dark road here. I'm talking about mass psychosis, right? This is not a light subject. And when mass psychosis get engaged, we can find ourselves in very, very dark territory, especially if the people running the op are conscious of it. They're doing it deliberately, and they're doing it from a top-down management of society perspective. We're getting played. So Carney's whole campaign and the entire Liberal campaign is nested in this collective fear, this sense of panic, and we don't know what to do, and we have this natural attachment system that wants to plug us in and connect us to a leader to take away our anxiety. And we've found ourselves a nice, simple explanation narrative that's going to tell us what all this means. Trump is trying to take our country. He wants our resources. He wants our water. He wants our way of life. He wants our. And Carney has been playing that song and banging that drum for weeks. We have 1 week left to go. But this is why we're seeing. So Carney's done a good job, and the Liberals had been working on this for a long time. Connecting Pierre Poilievre to Donald Trump in the minds of Canadians. And this is even more insidious now because of this crisis that Trump created and the distortion of the 51st state annexation joke. Okay, so we're in a mode of panic. Trudeau's gone. Carney comes in. I'm the guy to save you. Banging the drums of war. Now, it's possible at this point, the polls are suggesting that we could see a Liberal majority. And I've expressed in another video, I've talked about Bill C-63. If you don't know what that is, check out the Canadian Constitutional Foundation. Christine Van Geyn does a great explainer video about the Bill C-63 and the anti-speech bill online. The Liberals have done an awful lot to restrict our speech to be able to talk openly and communicate, and that limits what people can see. And I'm noticing that some people that I know have gone down. They must be in Facebook groups because they're putting stuff up on Facebook. I don't know where they're getting it from, whether it's a clique of friends, I don't know, but they're expressing this panic language. This we deify people that we put into that role, that attachment system that we have when we're under stress. We actually will treat people like almost like godlike or sacred figures. And this is how cults of personality, strangely, Carney doesn't seem to have one, but this is how some of these things form. So there's a cult-like quality to what we're seeing manifest in society at large, and it's quite widespread. If we get a Liberal majority, the next version of C-63 gets passed, we're not going to be able to communicate openly in Canada anymore. We're going to have throttling for small media producers, and there's going to be basically a thought police that's going to be a bureau that's going to be created in Canada. Yes, it's very much not good. So we're in a place right now we're being psychologically manipulated. We create the fear narrative. We bang on the fear drum. We associate, that the source of the fear, which is Donald Trump, with the opposition in the election. Okay, that's the level of insidiousness that we have. Pierre Poilievre is Donald Trump, and people, those emotions become psychically linked in our minds through that pattern of suggestion, the pattern interrupt, the orientation on an attachment figure, the object of fear, and the association of fear. It happens at a very primal level, a very unconscious level for most of us, and boom, there you have it. Someone has gone over to the Carney derangement syndrome. I don't trust Carney at all. I think that we're in big trouble if that happens. I'm praying that Canadians, we're going to see differences in the polls here from the outcomes in the polls here in Canada like they saw in the States. And in some states in the US, those pollings were just they were so wrong, not even funny. So we're crossing our fingers that Canadians can give us at least a conservative minority. I don't know how that functions after that, but that'll get us to the next stage. And in the meantime, I know if you're like me, you've got people in your life that are caught up in this. And it's difficult. And I pray that we can unwind this. I pray that we can figure out how to take the steam out of this, and that we don't get into a pattern with a Liberal leadership. I mean, Carney ran something in the UK before he came to Canada during Brexit that was dubbed Project Fear. And he collaborated with some other high-profile figures in the UK to create a fear campaign to get people to stay as part of the European Union. And it was hideous. The propaganda and the fear that they were spreading was hideous. So this is a pattern for him at this point. And that's concerning. Anyhow, my name is Shannon Boucher. This is the Canadian Culture Wars Report. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this kind of stuff. If you like it, please share it with others. Check out the links that I've added below, and let's pray. I'm not usually one for that, but I think that's what we got to do at this point. Well, the hour is closer than we think.